There we go. Let's do it. It is time for the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. It is the Trust Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us. We interview attorneys most every Friday, so I'm so happy that you can join us. We are here with Attorney Genna Hibbs, correct?
Genna, but
Genna.
Yes, very close.
Genna. Well, I've never met you, Genna. So
I know, this is our first time meeting.
Very nice to meet you. I love interviewing attorneys I've never met before. I mean, I really do, because it's really interesting and to find out so much about you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, I'm not sure where to start.
Start at the beginning. Where are you from?
Well, I moved around a lot growing up, but my family is mostly from Kansas, and my father worked for ASRM and Aerojet growing up, and would get relocated quite frequently. So I grew up in the mountains in California, in the Tennessee River Valley, in the plains of Oklahoma, and then we ended up back in the Kansas City area where I did high school. Went to the University of Kansas for my undergrad, double majored in genetics and English literature.
I saw it. Oh, that's a nice mix.
Well, and the English literature actually was a minor that I first started in British Romantic poetry, and I actually created the minor and got it approved by the university. But at that point, I was already well on my way of a full major, so I just went with that. But so I finished undergrad and wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I always wanted to be an attorney since I was in high school.
Well, that's always a question that I ask for people because I'm always interested in what makes someone go to law school. And a lot of times I'll ask that question, did you always want to be a lawyer? And a lot of people say, well, no, I never dreamt of it. But then I always hear, like yourself, yeah, I kind of always knew.
And I was actually, I believe, one of the first attorneys in my family because we, most of my aunts and uncles and stuff were either grain farming engineers or millers, a lot of millers, and then also some physicists. So kind of.
Yeah, my family had a lot of legal troubles, but I was the first attorney.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great.
As far as I know.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, after undergrad, I got a job as a lab technician, a QA/QC lab technician at a biomedia processing facility, and worked there for a few years. And then
just the titles are sound sophisticated.
Sure, right? Very impressive.
It is.
So impressive.
It is.
I did get to wear a bunny suit. That was a lot of fun, and go into a sterility suite. So that was a lot of fun. Then I ended up going to Japan for a year and teaching English through the government program that there is.
How did you like that? Did you speak Japanese?
I took some lessons before I went, but my job did not require any actual English. Uh-huh. So it was a wonderful experience and really gave me a chance to get out into the world and see something different and kind of discover myself. And then I went back to my lab job and started applying for law school. Because then I was ready.
I'd never been to Japan. My brother was in Japan.
Oh,
he was in the Marine Corps at Okinawa.
Yep.
And so I did a lot of reading about Japan because he's been there. James Cavell, you know who James Cavell is? Mm-hmm. One of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
Shogun.
The Shogun. Yeah, it's a great book.
So it got me in. That's why I love the Japanese culture.
Indeed. Yes. I lived in a very rural part of Japan, so it was really an amazing experience to see the agricultural life and all the traditional foods and just kind of the country lifestyle was a lot of fun.
That's interesting. And was there something that drove you to do that, or is that just an opportunity arose and you took it?
Not to get too personal, but I had a boyfriend in high school who was just terrible for me, and I had no idea because I'd never dated anyone else before, and he didn't want me to go to law school. And so I was really struggling with what to do with my life. So I actually went to Japan, and we were still in a relationship, but we broke up right after I moved back, and I doing my own, pursuing my dreams since.
Oh,
so
good.
I kind of got held back a little bit, I would say, for
here you are.
a minute.
So that's not bad. So, and then you went to law school. Where'd you go to law school?
I went to Gonzaga in the Pacific Northwest, which was a very interesting experience as well.
I have a friend that went there, not for undergrad, not for law school. he went to John Marshall for law school. So I was just rooting for Gonzaga because he's a friend of mine. So.
There you go. Now, are you from the Chicagoland area?
I'm a Chicagoan, born and bred, West Side. Went to Loyola, went to John Marshall.
Fantastic.
Was a union iron worker before I became an attorney. So everything. I'm a Cub fan. I drink Old Style.
Yeah,
I'm a Chicagoan.
That's great. That's great.
Through and through, I'm a Chicagoan.
That's great. And both my associate attorneys are from John Marshall. Yeah, so I have a lot of respect for John Marshall.
They do all the work.
They do all the work. I just delegate, sit back, sleep every day.
I always laugh about that because I always say that John Marshall law students do all the work. Go to court, they're all at the head office is the smart people like yourself.
Oh no, definitely not. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so you went to law school. Here's another thing I like to ask attorneys. What was your first job out of law school?
My first job out of law school was Pier 1.
Really?
Well, I graduated a couple years into the housing market crisis. So I moved from Gonzaga to Chicago with no job. And I studied for the bar, took the bar, and then I got a temporary job at Pier 1 down the street in Edgewater to make some extra money while I job hunted for an attorney job. So
the reason why I like to ask that question, because a lot of times people wind up doing whatever their first job out of law school is. Like not Pier 1, but as an attorney, what was your first job as an attorney?
My first job as an attorney, I did about a year of document review contract work for some of the bigger firms downtown. Intellectual property firms.
That's common for new lawyers.
There was a lot of people there that I saw. So, but in the meantime, my father, I was job hunting and he said, look, we've gotten you this far. What do we got to do to get you practicing intellectual property? Because this is what you've wanted to do your whole life. So we bought a little hobby farm out in Woodstock, and I hung my shingle, and we got it started. And so now this is my 10th year of my law firm.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. So I guess my real first attorney job was my own law firm.
Mine too. Why intellectual property?
I really enjoyed debate in high school, and I really enjoyed my honors science courses. And I said, if I could debate about science, that would be so much fun. And so I showed up to law school not knowing, because my family, nobody else was an attorney. And I showed up and I was basically like, where's the science law at? And they said, intellectual property. So I went that way. So that's how I found out about intellectual property.
Well, that's interesting. And so here's what I have two sons. And both my sons are in law school. And so I always like to ask attorneys, what kind of advice would you have for my two sons and other people that are in law school or just getting out of law school? What kind of advice would you have for them? Advice for them as students? Or advice for them as attorneys? As attorneys. Because they are going to be attorneys. So, what is it that you wish you knew when you were coming out of law school? Or what has worked for you?
That's a really good question. Well, Steve, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is establishing your systems, your standard operating procedures, so to speak. For me, finding, booking out your time for doing the little administrative tasks that you have to do for your work, not just deep diving into the research stuff, but really, as an attorney, structuring your own day, because in a lot of cases you are your own boss, and really establishing that from the beginning and adjusting it to what works for you, I think is really powerful if you can really maximize your own organization and how you get your goals done. Did you do any extracurricular activities while you were in law school? Yes, so much so that they made a rule about something because I was so much of an overachiever. They decided nobody else is allowed to do that anymore. Were you involved in internships, or what kind of things were you involved in? Yeah, sure. So my first semester of law school, I wrote a paper for a law review contest for a healthcare thing. You were on the law review? I was not, but
you were trying to write on to
my
the law.
first, well, not apply to be law, but just to write an article.
Okay.
So my first semester, I wrote a law review article for a competition for like biomedical
right up your alley.
healthcare stuff. And then after that, I did 2 internships, judicial internships with a judge in Kansas and a judge in Spokane, Washington. And then I also did the Saul Lefkowitz moot court competition, which is the trademark one. And then I did the health law moot court competition, and those were the same semester. And after that, they made a rule at the school that nobody was allowed to be in 2 moot court competitions at the same time.
It's a lot of work.
It was a lot of work. It was fun, though. I had a great time.
That's good. How did that help you?
I think so. I really did value my time doing the judicial internships and externships. Those were very, I think, useful for my practice as an attorney. And then moot court is great for building your team and working on your teamwork as an attorney. And then also the brief writing aspect of it is also, I think, really useful for practice.
And you now practice in the intellectual property and regulatory compliance. I saw that.
True, yes.
Talk a little bit about regulatory compliance, because that's like everything, isn't it?
There are regulatory aspects to most areas, I would agree. I would say I'm a little bit more focused in the health side of things with FDA regulatory compliance. We do some state and federal like food facility compliance, but then also class 1 and class 2 medical devices and drugs and supplements and things.
Does your practice ever bring you to court?
My practice does occasionally bring me to court. We only take 1 case at a time. We have 1 litigation going at a time, and it's generally federal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that something that you like to do, or is that something you pass off? Or
no, I'm definitely in the thick of it, but I do like delegating to my youngest associate as often as possible.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, but I do really enjoy litigation. I did a lot of debate in high school, as I mentioned. I did a little bit of debate in college as well, and so I really like the fight and the competition. And you put on your suit of armor and you go to fight and do your thing. So I do enjoy the legal argument aspect of it.
Do you remember the first time you went to a courthouse? Not as an attorney.
Not as an attorney?
No, as an attorney.
As an attorney. The first time I went to court as an attorney, that would be in Cook County. And my very first case was a state case, and I called it my practice case.
Because you were working for yourself.
I was working for myself. I took this really bizarre, unjust enrichment case that I call the stolen car case. And it went on for a year and a half, and I think we did 4 or 5 motions to dismiss. There were 6 summary judgment motions going on. The amount of value was I think less than $30,000, and it was just like.
But you learned a lot.
Learned so much in that, yeah.
I know when I was an early attorney, I did cases like that myself, and because I was in my own practice too, and it's and you kept everything I think I over-lawyered everything. But that's what you're supposed to do.
That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah. I take great pride in over-lawyering things. That's for sure. Yes,
I agree with you. And so, but now you're in intellectual property. Is that more companies you're helping? Are you helping individuals?
Yeah, great question. We have a mix in my practice. We help a lot of privately held businesses, family-owned companies that need intellectual property help, but they don't really have the resources or need for a full-time in-house person. We kind of try to fill that in-house niche, and then we also have our enforcement aspect as well, where we're doing the litigation as well if they need that. So we offer those kind of like business services, and then we also do work with many individuals. Either they're starting a company and they're kind of getting started, or they're just an individual inventor with invention.
Mm-hmm. But you're not doing patents or anything like that.
Yes,
right?
I'm also a patent attorney. Yes, I had to take a second bar. So
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have an IT, information technology master's in law. And so I took a lot of intellectual property and things like that. And does your practice involve anything like that, like anything in internet or
that's
technology, digital?
Right. Not as much. I've got my biology background. I'm really good with spatial structures and simple devices and stuff, but I'm not an electronics or computer software person at all. And then my second chair, Gauthami, she has a background in chemistry and is also, would not say, I think she would agree she's not a strong electronics or software person either. But I'm guessing your side of things were probably a little bit more copyright heavy.
I did a lot of copyright stuff, in school, but a lot of IP, a lot of trademark stuff.
Yep.
And, to get the masters, you have to kind of go down. What I did in law school is I always took the classes I liked. Is that what you did?
Yes and no. I think looking back now, I wish I had taken maybe more of the business law classes because I wasn't interested at the time, so I didn't really see the benefit of it at the time. But I think now I probably would have gone back and taken more like sales or something. But
now you're running your own business. Tell me a little bit about that. About what's it like when you started your law firm? Had you ever run a business before?
I'd never run a business before. I'd never taken any business courses or anything. So I basically used aspects of what I really liked about my job as a lab technician to set up my office procedures and went from there. And I tried not to bite off more than I could chew and kind of take baby steps. But I definitely grew over the years and started becoming an employer, and now we have health insurance and we're doing all the things. But yeah, I never really expected to be a business owner.
I think a lot of attorneys don't expect it, but that's what so many turn into that, don't they?
It's true. And we have this convenient, ethics rule where, non-attorneys aren't allowed to run law firms. So, we have to be in charge of it. So, yeah.
Well, that's a plus, I think.
It is a plus.
Well,
there's good reasons for it.
Well, we can talk a little bit about that because, there's a move to stop that, right? There's a move to let non-attorneys own law firms.
I think that would be very disastrous. And just even talking about the whole concept of smaller firms and attorney-owned law firms, the fact remains that over half of the employers in the United States are small businesses.
Yes.
Like small businesses, we are the employers of America. And I don't want to change that. Like, I think it's good. I think we get a lot more flexibility. I've got a happy team. We can offer really great benefits that you don't see in bigger companies.
Well, I agree with you 100%, and that's my practice. Is I help business owners. I don't like to call them small businesses.
Sorry.
But no, that's just me.
As opposed to mega corporations.
Yeah, well, I understand, and I just call them business owners, and only because because I think that's a business owner is a business owner, right? And so many people now. Having said that, I also help a lot of people who call themselves 1099 employees, and I have to tell them, "You're not an employee, right?
No.
You're running your own business."
Yeah,
So, and sometimes you have to overcome that. I help some realtors and things like that, and then you have to show them, you're in business for yourself, right? So, but I agree with you that small business is the backbone of America, and again, in the tax world that I'm in, sometimes I think that everything's against us.
Yeah. So you've had a big week maybe with taxes?
Well, yeah. It was tax day. It was very busy here. I don't prepare taxes myself. I have staff who does that.
Maybe some emergency phone calls.
And they're terrific at it. But yeah, we were very busy and everybody's worried. So nice to see the tax take a break, get a little bit of a breather. Mm-hmm. But it never really ends, so that's good.
That's good.
Don't want it to.
Right, things get awkward if there's too much of a pause. That's for sure.
Now, again, going back to business, your business. Do you do any? What do you call marketing? How do you get business? How does that work for you?
I would
especially
say,
as a new attorney. How did that work?
Right. I would say I've always been. Well, I don't know if it's non-traditional or not. I'm not really sure. But I've never really done paid advertising. I've always really focused on doing educational presentations and networking. It's been referral is kind of my
educational
main
presentations to companies about their IP or things like that. Tell me a little bit about that because I'm really interested in that type of. That's marketing.
Yeah, definitely. So I would say we have two big categories of presentation types that we make that we offer to the public. We do presentations to attorneys, and those can be either generic for you're a general practitioner, here's some IP stuff so you can be aware of things that might come up in your world. And then we have like IP specific presentations. Hey, fellow intellectual property attorneys, let me tell you all about gene patents and how those work, just because I enjoy talking about stuff. So there's that bucket. And then the other bucket would be kind of more the general public offerings where, for instance, at the end of March, I was in Lake Geneva for the GaryCon, if you've heard of that.
No.
It's a convention at Lake Geneva at the Grand Geneva Resort to honor Gary Gygax, the founder of Dungeons and Dragons. And it is a Dungeons and Dragons gaming convention. And so we do IP presentations there for content creators and
that's awesome.
Yeah, and answer a
lot of questions. Do you do a lot of those then? You do a lot of presentations?
Oh, I wouldn't say a lot. The pandemic definitely changed how things work, but we're getting back into the swing of things. And I would say that I usually do a few presentations a quarter.
Oh, that's a lot, I think, for an attorney. Many attorneys don't do any, right?
True.
And so I like presentations too. Do you do any CLE? Do you do anything like that for teaching?
Sometimes I do CLEs when I'm doing the association presentations. Oh, and I also I don't know if you've heard of Matter. It's a biotech kind of healthcare startup in the merchandise mart, but I do stuff there as a mentor. Like you can sign up to get a consultation kind of thing. Yeah,
that's awesome. I think getting up in front of a group is always fun. At least for me, it's fun.
Definitely, especially if you're talking about something you're excited about, and I definitely get excited about intellectual property.
And especially your area. That's we all have our little niche. I call it niche. I don't know what everybody else calls it.
I think niche is good. Yeah.
But because we're all in this, we all kind of have to pick our area that we know, and then present it because nobody else knows what we know, and sometimes we forget that, don't we?
Right, we do forget that, how much knowledge we've accumulated over the years, and I think that's been a big part of my process with getting associate attorneys and kind of experiencing being like, a supervisor or a mentor, and kind of seeing these younger attorneys and trying to be like, and be like, this, maybe go this way or that way. But it just kind of realizing I didn't know what I knew until I see them trying to do stuff. I'm like, I actually have a solution for this.
Because I was just going to mention it about you, because you mentioned you had some younger associates that came in. Did they come to you right out of law school? Was it something where they and so tell me a little bit about that, since I have two sons that are coming out of law school.
That's right. How do they end up there? So my second chair, my senior associate, Gauthamy, she had already been working for another legal firm for about a year and a half. So she was still pretty new as an attorney, and so she came on with me. And actually, she was because I'm all the way out in Woodstock. And she was in Chicago and working downtown. So we started out actually with a part-time situation where she would only work 5 hours a week for me, and we would work together and just to see if it was a good fit. And then after a month or so, she was like, I'm ready, let's do it. And I was like, okay. So she picked up her family and moved out here and went full time with us. And that was pretty thrilling.
Pretty exciting.
Yeah. And then our newest associate attorney, Emily, she came to us. We met her at a John Marshall event for an IP event, and we were talking to her. And her parents live in Crystal Lake. She grew up in the area, but she lives in Chicago. And she interned with us as a 3L, and then we put a ring on it afterwards. And she got, she studied for the bar, and then she didn't get to go swear in person, because when we got to go. I don't know. Did you go to McCormick Place? I went to McCormick Place and got sworn in.
Okay, so I have a big story about that, and I don't want to take.
But just to finish the thought, but Emily, we ended up doing a party in the office so she could get sworn in virtually, but we could still celebrate.
It's one of my favorite stories because I'm just going to tell you who swore me in. Michael Blandick. Do you know who he is? Former mayor of the city of Chicago.
Oh.
And he was the chief judge of the Illinois Supreme Court at the time, and I got sworn in with some other attorneys from out of town, and I knew who he was immediately, but nobody else does. I'm like, man, you guys know who
You
this
don't
guy
know
is?
He's kind of a big deal.
So one of my favorite stories is I said, Your Honor, the next week is this mass swearing in ceremony. Why wouldn't they just have me go down there? He said, a week? You can make $1 million in a week. And I said, Your Honor, you can make $1 million. I'm not going to make $1 million. But I'll never forget that. He was a very nice man, very generous with his time. And I'll never forget that day. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's one of the things I love most about our profession is this concept of giving back, to the attorneys underneath you as they're coming up and all the attorneys that helped us when we were young. Yes. And that's just.
So, again, having two sons that are in law school, it's quite a, watching them become attorneys. They were always kind of junior attorneys, but you can, seeing the progress, it's pretty amazing.
Oh, that's wonderful. I actually have a toddler, so I've got a ways till we're worried about college.
Did you go, when you went to law school, did you go 3 years and out? Is that how you worked?
Yep.
When you were in law school, did you observe that the change? Because there's a change in people when you're in law school, right? When you become a lawyer, right? That's the whole process, right? They're supposed to be training you to become a lawyer.
It's true, reprogramming you.
Yeah,
so
that's kind of that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and since I had taken that couple of years to work beforehand, I definitely felt a little non-traditional because I wasn't just a 22-year-old coming straight out of undergrad. So I had a little bit of a different perspective. But yes, like I was so worried before law school that my inner child was going to get completely destroyed and crushed that I took all these art classes like the summer before, like glass mosaics and pottery and stuff, just in case I was never creative again after this, because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Edge.
Who knows? You have this image of, these innocent little babes go into law school and then we come out like hardened, attorneys that are, are soulless or something. Who knows? But yeah.
Well, because I haven't talked about that. You've been in practice for yourself for some years. Do you have any outside of court? Because you say you do court, okay, not a lot. That's not the focus of your practice, right? Do you have a lot of interaction with other attorneys?
I do with my association work, so I like to volunteer for a couple different groups. I really enjoy the Chicago Bar Association's committee offerings, and I try to participate in that, though the pandemic kind of got me off track. But there's a local group called Chicago Friendly Lawyers, run by this lady named Dana, who's I don't think she's family law, I think she's estate planning.
Dana, how I met you?
Yes, the Dana that we met. But so the Chicago Friendly Lawyers Association is an excellent group, and they're getting back up from the pandemic, and I'm very excited about that. Did you go to the conference right before?
Did not.
Oh, that was a really good time. Dana is really good at conferences. But anyway, and then the other group I really like is the National Association of Patent Practitioners, and it's just also a bunch of nerdy patent attorneys, and then we have a forum and you can ask questions.
Okay, so I'm a tax attorney. Talk about nerdy, right?
Yeah, so do you have like a forum group that you can go and chat with? Or?
I've been involved with a group of attorneys, tax attorneys that do my line of work. We're a little bit different in that I help people with in the collection area, which is a little bit different than what people think of as a tax attorney. Although I think I fought a long time not to call myself a tax attorney, but now I am a tax attorney. So it is.
So with collections, is that a small ecosystem? Like,
not probably not, because there's so many people that have problems. Like the IRS solved almost 8 million collection cases last year. So there's a big, but the thing is that a lot of non-attorneys do it, and that's good and bad. So yeah. But again, enough about me. Let's talk about you. I wanted to we were talking about. I want to go back to marketing because it's such in any business it's so important. But a lot of attorneys don't look at it that way. They don't look at either they're afraid to market or they're afraid to somehow it seems cheap or something like that. What's your view on marketing your firm?
I would say I also have some hesitation with, putting my face on a billboard or something, but that's also not really my market either. Like my practice is so specialized, and only certain kinds of people really are looking for that help. So, kind of public marketing doesn't really make sense for my customer profile or business method. But I do, I do think having a good brand is very important, and being able to find an avenue or a marketing channel that you're really comfortable with is probably part of what I talked about earlier, finding out what's going to work for your system, like what your system is going to be, and kind of moving forward with that. But we do occasionally do like sponsorships, like if there's a local event going on, like sometimes we'll jump in and help out.
I would assume, and I don't know, so that McHenry has a smaller legal community, and so do you find yourself with them?
No, it's so funny because whenever because when I do go out and network in McHenry, I'll occasionally run into attorneys and they're like, "Oh, I never see you at court." And I'm like, "You're not going to see me at court." Like there was I had one case really in McHenry County where I was helping citizens of a township, argue about something, and kind of a municipality sort of a situation. But yeah, for the most part, I don't go to the county courthouse at all. So I'm just kind of out there to enjoy the countryside more than anything.
I've been to the McHenry County.
It's lovely, isn't it?
It is hard to get to.
Well, but
for me,
once you're there, though,
that's one thing about McHenry. It's kind of there's no easy way to get there.
There's not, but I really enjoy our offices just a block away from the train station, from the Metro. And so we've had, some of our inventors, especially with our our pro bono clients and stuff, it's really easy for them to hop on the train and come on out and just walk over to the office. Yeah.
I had an aunt that lived down in McHenry many years ago, so I spent some time up in McHenry. It's been some years, but I really liked it up there.
Yeah, so. And plus we have the Woodstock, the Groundhog Day stuff, that claim to fame. There's lots of fun things.
I was asking you about your interaction with attorneys because I was interested in your view on what makes a good attorney.
Well, kind of back to the warm fuzzies about paying it forward. I think that makes a good attorney, kind of having a awareness that that we are bigger than the sum of our parts. We're all in this together. I think that makes a good attorney. I think strong ethics make a good attorney, and I think passion makes a good attorney.
Good answer. I think that's true. I think I would subscribe to all of that. Because but that's what makes any good business person, right? You've got to be passionate about what you do.
True, but we also have these extra factors that ask us to make decisions that might not be what most people would want to make, like maybe business-wise or safety-wise or comfort-wise, but we're told that we need to make certain decisions because it's the right thing to do or the ethical thing to do. And I think that extra layer really requires somebody that can make that decision, that it's more important to do what's right than necessarily what's easy.
Agreed. Tell us a little bit about intellectual property in your niche. What is that? Because people hear about intellectual. What is that?
So intellectual property is basically just a general bucket term for intangible property rights. And so things that you just can't literally pick up and touch in kind of the full concept of it. But there are several buckets in intellectual property law, and there's copyrights, there's trademarks, there's patents, and there's also trade secrets, and then also like right of publicity law as well is tossed in there. So that's kind of the lay of the land of what are the main pillars of intellectual property.
Was patent something that you did as an offshoot of what you do, or is that something that you always wanted to do? Because just so the audience knows, patent's kind of a different area. It's the only area that you can call yourself, I specialize in patent law. And as you mentioned, there's a different bar exam or there's a different license for that.
It's true. There is a different bar exam. You have to have a science background and meet certain qualifications to sit for it, but you don't have to be an attorney to sit for it. So you can be what's called a patent agent. So there are lots of engineers and stuff like that go into that straight out of undergrad or master's.
It's like that in tax court. You don't have to be an attorney to go to practice in tax court. very few non-attorneys practice in tax court because it's very difficult to get there. But very few do, but you could be.
I had anxiety just thinking about a non-attorney trying to do. It would be a very special situation for somebody to have the kind of experience that they would feel comfortable doing that.
I agree. And if very few people do, but there are some. So there was I don't want to get off on a tangent, but there was a recent case with Charlie, the guy from the show, the 2 men and a 2.5
Charlie
men.
Sheen.
Charlie Sheen had a tax problem, went to tax court. He used a non-attorney to represent him in that. I only know that because we had some interaction, he and I, about that case. So I found that it was very interesting that he wasn't an attorney.
Interesting choice.
And that he had a high-profile client that would hire someone that wasn't an attorney to help them with that. So that
it happens,
it's
though.
Interesting. Yeah.
It happens. Yeah, definitely.
So have you had any interaction with anybody who isn't an attorney that does the patent? But there's very few, I would think.
Well, there actually are quite a few patent agents out there.
There are.
And that association that I'm in particular, the membership's about half agents. So yeah, it's definitely a different group, than just a regular kind of networking with different attorney groups. Like networking with attorneys is its own thing, but then networking with certain practice areas of attorneys are also its own thing. And yeah, patent practitioners are their own thing as well.
I see that.
But we're fun. We have a good time. So.
What I found is that almost everybody has a good time.
I know.
I did a lot of bankruptcy work, so I did a lot of bankruptcy. There was always up in Michigan that every year we would go when I first became an attorney, and did a lot of networking with them and the judges and everything. So there's that clique, and then tax guys are a different clique, and it's just, but we all have fun.
Yes.
And it's all really about, all of those networking is really about learning, isn't it?
Yes, and having your peer group around you to learn things together, and I find that to be, especially getting into business ownership, one of the most important things I did when I first moved out to Woodstock was I was invited to this casual women's entrepreneur coffee group. And so it was local women that owned businesses, and we would meet once a week for morning coffee and just talk about what we were doing. And I feel like I learned so much from that group, even though none of them were attorneys or running a law firm, just learning lessons from each other. No,
what we learn is that a business is a business, really. And so you can learn so much from somebody else that doesn't do your lines. Like, how can that work for me? And that's so important.
And that there's a regular kind of lifespan to it where you're going to go through the same trials and tribulations that somebody else has already gone through. So why not figure out what they did and then maybe work off of there? Yeah.
So coaching, right? Mm-hmm. And you talk about mentoring.
Mentorship, very important. Yeah.
So you have. I asked you about the patent lawyer, and I don't think you answered that. Is that something you always wanted to do too?
Oh yeah,
sorry.
I
just
had
interested in that.
A little gap there, but so I knew that I wanted to do patents from the beginning, but I also didn't want to bite off more than I could chew with getting my practice started. And you have to get, the liability insurance is very different for intellectual property practice, especially for patent prosecution, because they just assume everybody has an IBM portfolio worth millions and billions of dollars. So there were extra considerations and costs just to do that, and on top of studying and taking an additional bar exam. So I started my IP boutique firm and got started on trademarks and enforcement and other things. But I didn't actually take the patent bar until about 5 years later, when I felt like I had enough growth to support the extra investment of opening up this whole new branch of my practice. But I had always had my eye on it, but I wanted to be very careful about not doing it too soon when I wasn't ready, or when my potential clients weren't really ready to hire me. I would have had a hard time being a confident patent attorney also within the first 5 years of being an attorney and starting a law firm. That would have been rough.
Adding another avenue, it's hard enough. Yeah, starting your own business. Are your clients, are they local? Do you help people outside of Illinois, or how does that work?
Well, probably similar to your practice. We can practice for anybody that has a need, because it's a federal field. I do have probably a majority of my clients are in the Chicago area, but I also work with people all across the country and internationally.
Yeah, there's something that I think that's interesting, as you mentioned, because I can help people. Although most of my clients are from Chicago, I've had clients from across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So
it happens, yeah.
And, it's always fun to find out, how'd you find me?
I know, right? Definitely. Especially, I've got contacts in Washington State and Kansas and different places. So yeah, people pop up.
So where do you see your practice going in the next 5 years? You now you have 2 attorneys working for you. That's pretty impressive.
And we just actually brought on a full-time paralegal recently. So that was our newest expansion. So we're 5 strong.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So I've got some general goals for my practice. But in my mind, I really enjoy the litigation. I really enjoy the fight. But I know I don't always want to do that. And patent prosecution is interesting because it's far more collaborative usually, because the examiner, they want you to work for it. We don't want the U.S. government to be handing out easy patents, because we want patents to be valuable. So they want you to work for it, but they also will give it to you if you earned it, right? If you find the spot you're supposed to be at, they'll give it to you. So you can kind of have a little bit more of a collaborative environment with a patent examiner than you do in court, where somebody's.
So they're not trying to stop you; they're trying to just put you in the right.
Yeah, as long as you get to where you're going, they're like, okay, you're good. So my kind of daydream is that I will continue to litigate until I kind of get sick of it, and then kind of just fully go into just patent prosecution and kind of settle into the gentle fields, graze.
You've probably heard this before, right? That's I forget who said it, but many years ago, he said everything that's going to be invented has already been invented. Right? Not true. Before I let you go, let's talk a little bit about. I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, and in your line of work.
Okay.
What do you see there? Is that because it's touching everything?
It is. It really is.
And so, where do you see that affecting you?
Well, I see a lot of marketing geared towards, we've got new legal tools for your practice involving AI. Okay. I personally am not very impressed with AI yet. I'm impressed with the progress they're making, but I do not think that AI is anywhere where we would actually be using it or relying on it, which I think is the most important test. We've tried a few tools, but from just an intellectual property law side, there's been a lot of discussion about it, and pretty much across the board and kind of every category, it's pretty firmly decided that AIs are not going to be inventors or artists or not considered owners. So that's been kind of the big, like, what are
I know that's not your area, but copyright and all of that, and who owns that copyright and who's
all the images that the AI is basing itself on, and all the infringement questions going on there, for sure, definitely.
I saw someone yesterday talking about being suing ChatGPT. It's like, well, that's a machine. How can you sue the machine? How could they violate your copyright law? But maybe the person who asked them that, So I don't know. It's kind of a unique area, right? Where is that? Because we know it's going to come, right?
There is definitely going to be a reckoning with this new tool, since it is knowingly borrowing from lots of people that have protectable copyrights. Yeah. It's a very interesting situation. So you do see the ones that are like, we're just going to do public domain stuff. Okay, but I was in a CLE about AI, and this lady said, let's see if you can tell which of these pieces of music was written by an AI and which was human, and which piece of art was made by an AI. Every single one, it was like, that's the AI, that's the AI. It's just not there yet. It's not there yet.
So I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had fun.
I did. It was fun.
I knew you'd have fun. I always have more fun next time we have you on. So we'll have you on again. Yep. And so thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Steve. This has been great.